Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dr. Denisha Keating Show. Super excited to be here with you and have Dani with me. Just a reminder that this is that kitchen table conversation. So we're going to go back and forth in a conversation about this particular topic. And, the rules are no yelling, no screaming, no talking over the other person, but really asking questions, not to combat, but to understand where the other person has come from so that we can have a conversation versus just leaving feeling like we were the winner. And then we're inviting you guys to be the fly on the wall to see how we would navigate this conversation. And what we're going to be talking about today is unconditional love in relationships. And I think from my own background, I was telling Dani before we got started is, being in foster care is hard when you've been hurt by people. And sometimes what we think unconditional love is through thick and thin, always just allowing people to kind of walk in and destroy and walk out and being like, I love you. That's not what love is. And so I'm going to have Dani take it away. Can you describe what unconditional love is? And let's just jump into that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here. And so unconditional love starts with loving yourself and accepting yourself for exactly who you are. And oftentimes we think, there's like good parts of us and then there's bad parts of us, right? And so we kind of shame the bad parts of us, quote unquote bad parts, and then we try to lean into the good parts. But what I've learned unconditional love is it's accepting all those parts of you, because those shadows of you, let's say, let's say you're triggered or you get mad easily or whatever that is, right? That's just your body's wisdom reacting because you don't feel safe. And so understanding that your own judgment on yourself is oftentimes what's perpetrating that shadow. And so unconditional love starts with yourself. And then to take it a step further beyond, it's accepting of everyone in your life exactly for who they are and not expecting them to be what you perceive them or want them to be. Accepting them where they are on their journey.
Yeah.
And exactly who they are. And of course, leaving room for compassion, not judging other people as well.
So when a lot of people say like, you have to learn to love yourself, self-love is really important. I've seen where I understand it from certain people, but then I've seen a mockery of it as well, where I'm like, wow, that's a little too far. Like it's more cheesy, I should say. It's not that it's wrong. It's just very cheesy in the sense of like, you just have to hug yourself today. And I don't think that that's what you're saying. But when you say self-love, what does that look like? Because I'll have you answer that and then I have a follow-up question. So what is self-love? What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
No, you're good.
Beautiful. So self-love, as we are relational beings and we are surrounded by people all the time, people act as mirrors to trauma, triggers, things that we want and need to heal within ourselves. And so self-love is recognizing when we are triggered, angered, saddened, hurt by what someone else is saying to us, and understanding that what they are saying to us shouldn't be taken personally because it's their own projection of their own perspective, traumas, experiences, etc. And so when you are able to in-source that understanding within yourself and understand that, I'm hurt by these words that, like, let's say this person said, looking within myself and being like, why was I hurt? What made me feel this way and what do I need? And oftentimes it's acknowledging that this anger or sadness is coming up and allowing it to actually be there in your body as a feeling, emotion, sensation. And then intentionally, right? This is an intention. This is a choice that you're making. Offer that part of you love, compassion. And then offer yourself that forgiveness. Like, I forgive myself for buying into the misunderstanding that I shouldn't have been hurt right now and I shouldn't have been angry. The truth is, I'm still working through things, and my body's wisdom, my body is so wise, and I am going to make an effort to tune into that part of me more, to understand and translate what my body is telling me. 97% of what we live out of is our unconscious, and our body is our unconscious. And so when these sensations, emotions, feelings come up, they are signals for us to communicate with it and see what is going on. And so self-love is understanding our body is working for us, not against us. And then through all those steps, finding that self-acceptance and self-love.
There are situations, and so I know a couple people who are listening where it wasn't that we misunderstood the conversation. So let's more so there are situations in my past where that has been where I'm like, wow, I misread that whole situation. Like I thought that person was more angry in that text message than what, and that I think that's what you're talking about. But what do we do when it is a situation of someone purposely trying to verbally assault or hurt or insult us? Because that's where I've been in the past where I'm like, wow, maybe I'm misunderstanding them. And they're like, no, I want to verbally hurt you so you walk away feeling like crap. What can we do in that situation? Because that's not misunderstanding the situation. It's like we're literally having someone stand in front of us and say like we're all of these things. And I understand to a point of that's where they feel. But then there's the moments where it's like, no, this person's just really, really mean. So what can we do to work through that and not just dismiss it? Because I think that's kind of like a different level of we don't want to say, oh, I misunderstood that, because then we're not in a relationship or a friendship with that person on the right terms. We end up like, there's a lot there. So what can we do to really like see the situation for what it is when it is someone hurting us versus a misunderstanding?
Right. Yeah. When someone is ill-intentioned and they want you to feel bad intentionally. I love this question because this actually just happened to me the other day where someone yelled at me for about 5 minutes and old me, would have been crying right away. Of course, like that's doesn't feel good, right? To be yelled at. And sorry, okay? I just lost my train of thought. Yeah.
That's okay. You're good.
And I know this is going to sound too simple, but I decided to have compassion for her. She was obviously going through something that had nothing to do with me. And she decided to, and I do believe this still, she's projecting that onto me.
Right.
Yeah. And she wanted me to feel bad about it, right? And so I choose to see it that I have nothing to do with that. Whatever she's talking about, I choose, even though it is, right? It is being forced at me, right? Blamed at me, like this aggression, right? But I chose to offer her compassion anyways. Because I don't know what other things she's going on in her life. I don't know that. Yeah. And it's hard when you have your own inner turmoil and you aren't able to in-source that like power and that safety within yourself to offer someone that energy, that compassion. But I have found that compassion has enabled me to transmute whatever feeling I receive from that person yelling at me, if that makes sense.
And I think that what I don't want someone to hear is if you're experiencing abuse from someone. This is not what Dani's talking about. She's talking about a conflict that happened from somebody else who came in and just like took out her bad day on Dani. And that like I 100% wish I could say that to myself more in those conflicts, to say, something's going on that's not about me right now. And I think that helps when we're able to do that, because it is freeing that it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I made this person have a bad day. But then there are some people who are in situations, and it to an extent too is in an abusive situation, the reason that person is being abusive is because of unhealed things inside of them. And it is really difficult when you're on the receiving end of that abuse to say, this is just something internally to you. You need to exit that conversation if you can and get out of that. But I love that you said we can carry that turmoil from those kind of situations. And then when we do face this conflict with someone that maybe we're not very close to or a stranger, we're like, oh, it has to be me. Everybody hates me because look at how many times I'm treated this way. And this is where you're talking about that shift, correct?
Yeah, that pattern, right?
Yeah.
That pattern, then that cycle. And how do you get out of that? How do you insource that love and break that cycle of love? And so I'll give this an example in terms of like relationship, because I actually just recently got engaged, and I had a pattern in which I was dating men for over a decade, and I would always tell them I love them, and none of them would ever tell me I love you back. And so it was a cycle.
We don't like that.
So like in my mind, like, men don't love me, and I can't find someone who loves me, and no one will stay with me for over 2 years. This was like a cycle all in my 20s. And so how did I move through that, right?
Yeah.
And so after I found someone who I thought, we ended up being together for 4 years, so that was already like a cycle that was broken, but still did not tell me he loved me. And in your mind, you're probably like, oh my goodness, you were with someone for 4 years, you know? But I needed that experience. I needed, I guess, that breaking point. And so after that, I was like, you know what? I'm going to actually work on myself. I'm going to see, like, who is Dani? Who am I? Like, what do I need right now? And how can I break this cycle? And so I surrendered to the universe, and I was like, put the right people in front of me in order for me to understand, like, what this is that I'm going through. And so I did get support from several people, from, you know, therapists, coaches, mentors, life coaches, to help me see what I was missing was that self-love. And so this is what we're talking about, right? What is self-love? What is unconditional love? And so what I was programmed to believe is love without conditions, or love with conditions. And so if they did this for me, then they loved me. Or if you do this, or if you act a certain way, then you are lovable, or you are enough to receive love. And so I realized I never felt good enough to receive it. And I know this is like, we are mirrors, right? Our inner world is a mirror of our outer world. And so on a subconscious level, I was somehow attracting that view from others, from men, because that's how I saw myself, which I didn't realize in the moment. I didn't know. I thought, like, I was like, oh, well, I love you. I'm giving all this love. I care for you so much. Like, why aren't you giving it back? And I realized it was just like I was forcing myself. And I realized now, looking back, I didn't allow myself to speak my truth in partnership and relationship. I suppressed that so that I can make him happy. That was what I thought love was. That was a condition. I'm going to not speak my truth so that he can be happy. And then I'm going to like put down my intuition, what, like, my inner trust, you know, my inner gut response. If I feel a certain way, I'm going to hide that away, because that's not, you know, that's going against what he's thinking or saying. And so when I stepped into my power, my trust in myself, listening to that gut response, not being scared anymore to speak my truth in a loving way to others and myself, that's when things started to shift in my life. And that's when I met my current fiance. And I will say it was not easy. The first couple years, there was a lot of hurt, sadness, hopelessness. But what changed was I was willing to change and see a perspective in which I was not aware of. And so from there formed this beautiful, beautiful unconditional love.
So when it comes, so I want to make sure I'm tracking, just because it makes sense, but there might be someone who's like, wait, I know for some people you guys might struggle with the phrase "my truth," just because I personally have heard that phrase used incorrectly as well, where people have said, like, well, your truth is like a lie that you want to tell yourself. What she's saying is not that. Like, what she's saying is that she needed to accept, like, what was she wanting to accept in a partner, and what was she actually going to stand up for herself for, and say, hey, this is my non-negotiable. This is something I need from you. This is where, you know, a few people I've talked to have heard that "my truth" statement, and they've said, like, oh, my parents used to say, like, oh, that's your perspective. And again, when you're in a healthy relationship with someone, you're supposed to both come to the table and be able to say, these are my needs. These are the things I will not negotiate. These are the things I will not accept at all. Like these are what I stand for. These are my values. And I don't feel like we really had very good conversations around dating growing up. It was like, you'll find somebody. And it's like, but how? Like, how do we find those people? And it really comes down is like, what do you value? What are you wanting the other person to value? But what we tend to do, I think a lot of the time, is we step into a relationship and we say, it'll work out if they really care for me. And like you said, like the condition was, you must like me because you're willing to hang out with me. You must like me because you're willing to pay for dinner. And for some people, that's just a transaction. They're like, oh, if I want something from you, I give you what you want, so I get what I want. And you're saying that there is this moment of unconditional love is so different, where it's regardless of the good or the bad in life, we're partnering together and saying through thick and thin. And that, I think, is a missing component for friendships as well, is we do live in a world right now where a lot of people are like, oh, you cross me, you're not for me, you disagree with me, we're out, like completely out. And we have lost the ability to sit and have those hard conversations and say, hey, what you did, I know it was not intentional, but it hurt. And I would appreciate that not to be something we do going forward. And that, like, that's very freeing when you can have that in a conversation with someone that you care about. But I think a lot of us fear that rawness. How can someone maybe take one step? Maybe they've been in a relationship for 10, 15 years and they've never had that raw, like, hey, that way you talk to me has really hurt me. This thing that you do when you come home and you just like shut yourself into your room, I feel like you're shutting me out. How can they have that first conversation?
Yeah, I love this question because it's like micro explaining. When you micro explain what's going on in your life, the receiving and the person on the receiving end feels so different. So for example, right, like you lock yourself in a room and you're like feeling all this anger and you want to have that conversation. First and foremost, write it down. You're going to have way more confidence doing it on your own than actually, having the first time be with that other person. And hopefully, whoever that other person is, it is someone who will be open to listening. And so that is something you do. So you write it down first, write everything out. And then when I would say, like, when you actually step into that conversation, don't just start like attacking, or like, obviously there's so much that needs to be said and you're co-creating the space with the other person. Yeah. You invite them in. It's their choice, right? Hey, I'm feeling a certain way. Are you open to exploring this with me? And so it's like an invitation. So it's like, it gives them a sense of like, oh, okay, yeah, like I want to step into this conversation with you. And then you say, so you had said this thing to me and it made me feel really bad because I feel like I am not good enough or something, whatever that is. So you take personal responsibility of the feeling that came up. And so, because oftentimes you're like, oh, you did this to me, you did this, and you're like the wrong one, right? Like, and so the other person is likely not going to be receptive to that. And so openness of like, I felt this sadness when you told me this. Can you explore this with me? And I have a sense that it is connected to, some trauma from my childhood or this experience that happened to me. And it's replicating here. And I feel like, I feel really saddened by this. Can you hold space for me? And so it's that micro explaining of what the feeling is that's actually coming up.
I think it's also really important because I'm particularly a particular person that I'm thinking about when we've had conversations about this. My therapist reminded me that what we have to be very careful of is we're not talking down to the person. And that's what we tend to do in an argument is we come to the table and we're like, you hurt my feelings on purpose. You never take me into consideration. You always, versus like you said, coming into the conversation and saying, I have been feeling very overwhelmed. And I noticed, like, for example, if someone shuts themselves in their room after work, it's like, I noticed that after work, you come home and you kind of lock yourself in the room and I'm not sure what's going on, but what I felt was that you don't want to see me. And I've been feeling a lot of insecurity about that. And I am scared that we're just kind of being roommates now. But you're not in that conversation. You're not saying, well, you're shutting yourself out and you don't want to hang out with me. And it's just like, I've been feeling really insecure because I have been reading that as you not wanting to hang out with me. And I don't think that, and really saying like, I don't think that's accurate, but my mind is saying something different. So you're having, and then being willing to listen, because there might be just like, I didn't even think about it, or I'm just overwhelmed, or they might say the hard truth of just like, well, I don't want to see you. And it's like, that's a hard conversation. But most of the time we read into what somebody else is doing, and it had nothing to do with that. And I remember a friend of mine saying, we go to church together, and like I had my eyes closed and I didn't see her, but I had like opened my eyes and then closed them and I didn't see her there. And she thought I looked at her and then looked away, like, oh, don't talk to me. And I was like, no, I like blinked. And she's like, see, I totally misread that. But she had the strength to kind of say like, hey, like, are we okay? And she said, she came to me and she said, I know it's my insecurity speaking. Are we okay though? And I was like, wait, what? And she told me like, oh, I thought you made eye contact with me and then like looked away. And I was like, I didn't see you. I am so sorry that that's how you felt though. That was not intentional. And I said, always feel free to like tap me. Like if like I'm standing there, like, don't be mad. I will not be mad if you interrupt me. And so she's like, thank you for that, because I thought you were going to take that differently. But it was her strength to come to me and say, hey, I think it might be my insecurity, but this is what I read. And that was just a different way of approaching it. And versus what she could have done is shut down completely and been like, oh, you just don't like me. And I'm like, but then how many times did I take that? And I was like, oh my gosh, I do the same thing. Like, I'm like, so this is where it can be so freeing to have that conversation. But then there are going to be people in our life that it's not. And it actually makes it worse. So if it is that you have this conversation and the person's like, I'm not changing it, this is who you get, what would your advice be with that?
So what I would say is you really have to sit with yourself and see if this is someone you want in your life. And so this is, of course, if this is like a friend or a partner who you're like choosing to be in this, partnership with, and really sit with them. Like, am I okay accepting this person as they are and how they're treating me? And if not, then that's something to what you said, the non-negotiables, about dating, friendship, all the things. Like, what do you value about yourself? What are your core values, right? Do you want authenticity? Do you want vulnerability? Do you want connection? What are your core values? And then begin to look at, relationships from that point of view.
What would be, if you're comfortable sharing, what are some of your non-negotiables that you have that you are just like, no?
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Because when I definitely got into this relationship, I didn't have any. It's something.
Hey, sometimes that grows. It does grow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So of course, I don't like yelling. It's something that's very triggering from childhood that my mother used to do. And so yelling is, I know it's now I know it's like someone who hasn't been heard in the past. They want to speak louder, they want to be heard. And so for me, that's very triggering. So I can't be with someone who's going to try to over yell at me. And so someone who is able to sit with their stillness and, reflect upon their thoughts and whatever inner world is going on, kind of like your friend who had that little insecurity. She sat with it and was like, oh, it's my little insecurity. I'm going to go and confront her. And then now with her confronting you and you actually being like, oh my goodness, it was a misunderstanding. Now she will feel more safe going to you in the future, and you will feel safer going to her in the future. And so this level of like vulnerability is another one for me, where the openness, like I want to be able to hold space and open, even if it doesn't feel good, even if something I did made you uncomfortable, I want to know so that I can grow and be better. I don't want to ever be like stuck in a perspective. And so that's another, non-negotiable, someone who's open to seeing my side of the story and exploring it together. And then I think those are like the foundations, like mutual respect. Trust
Mm,
is a big one, which of course has to be earned. And
mm,
what I've learned with that is just over communication is really beautiful. And
mm,
so with over communication, anything, even like where are you going, who are you hanging out with, because it can kind of be two-sided, right? Like if you want freedom and then you don't tell the other person where you're going, then the other person just starts to distrust you, which ends up leading to you wanting more freedom. And so there's this like kind of balance that has to happen
yeah.
where you're going to go hang out with friends. That's all right. We're relational beings, and then coming home and then sharing the story, right? Like you're in an excitement. I want to know everyone in your life, and I want to know everyone that you interact with, and if you're open to sharing, I'm open to hearing it and holding space for
Mhm.
that. And so communication, yeah, is a really big one.
I think I'm like thinking where it's like some people are like, well, over that's too much for you to know who I'm hanging out with and where am I going. But you're not doing it in like a, hey, you need to check in with me to make sure I'm okay. But it's like, I want to share in those excitements with you. But I do want to get to know who you're hanging around. In a relationship, I feel like so many people, where the relationships we see suffer is that people don't know how to talk. So it's like, well, I hid that I was hanging out with that friend because I know you don't like that friend. And it's like, okay, let's get down to it. Why it's not just that I don't like that person. What is the reason you don't like that person? And you cannot just say back, I don't know, it's just something about them. You have to reflect on that, because it might be like, I just feel unsafe with that person. I don't like that this person jokes like that, where it's like they put women down or they put children down or they put men down. That's like my non-negotiable for friends is I will not sit with you while you gossip. Like, I just don't do it. I can't do it. If you're going to attack your spouse, I'm going to leave the room. Like, people will send videos and like reels and stuff like bashing men. And I'm like, I won't respond to them, because to me, it's so sad to put people down. And you're like, it's just funny. It's just true. I'm like, it's not though, because if it was you on the receiving end, if you saw a video about that, about like a wife or a girlfriend, you would probably be upset and offended. So why do we do it back? But not everyone takes that as like a serious thing. But me and my husband, like, even in the beginning of our relationship, we were just like, oh, this is what I'm doing, this is who I'm hanging out with, like, oh, I'm going over here today. Like, it was even while we were dating, and it had nothing to do with control. It was all about us learning how to communicate. So we're like, let's start with the things that we do on a daily basis so that we can learn how to communicate. Then when we got engaged, we started doing that with money. And that was hard, because it's like, oh, I'm going to buy a soda. And it's like, we're not asking for permission, but it is one of those things, like, there's accountability there, especially when you're learning each other and learning to be on a budget together. And it can feel weird at first, but it has, again, nothing to do with control, but we're bringing each other into each other's day. And we still do that. We'll be married this summer 7 years and together 8 years, but it is that, like, we still do that. And like, we get to talk a lot about life, because we're like, oh, this happened. And even if it's a heavy thing or a fun thing, like, we don't want to only talk when it's heavy, if that makes sense. So that's where you're learning in these little day-to-day things of like, oh, I'm going to get to go here for lunch. That's really cool. You're not doing this like, I'm pooping, I'm going to the bathroom, I like, I like cut my toenails. Like, that's not what we're saying. But to build a strong communication, like, if that is a priority for you to build that, it is being willing to say, I'm okay. Like, no secrets. There's no secrets. I'm not hiding anything from you. But also, if it does come to that, where it is that other person's hiding and saying, well, I know you don't like that person, or I know you don't like when I, go do this or that or spend this amount of money, I have to ask that hard question of just like, how much do you value that other person when they've asked you not to do that thing? Because if it's not a dangerous thing, but if it is a person where maybe that person has said something to you that's offensive, and that like your spouse or your boyfriend, girlfriend hangs out with that person, it's like, okay, they said the offensive thing to me and they're like, well, it was just a joke. It's like, but it still hurt my feelings, and that person has not tried to fix or apologize or fix the situation. So it's like, okay, then maybe we're not compatible in that, because you guys, there's no respect for the other person, because this is someone you want to do life with. Friends can come and go, unfortunately. But if you're building a life with someone, it is important to learn how to communicate that. And I love that you said that, like, it's just even just like, oh, this is what I got to do today. And some people will be like, that's too much. It's like, then that kind of a person is not for you. And that's okay. But for others, we want to be like, I love that you said brought into your day, like to share with that. Like, I want to be excited when you're excited, and I want to be sad when you're sad. I don't want to miss the mark on that. If someone was, maybe starting their dating journey out and they're not really sure, like maybe they're working on themselves. Like maybe they're just like, dating is off the table. I just need to work on myself. What would be some advice that you can give them about like the timing to get back into dating?
That's a good question. I would say that it's a level of like trust within yourself to know you're okay to start dating. And that's okay. Like you don't have to be completely healed to start dating, because it's actually really beautiful when you are in relationship, but timing is something that is so subjective. And for me, I had decided, oh, I'm going to be single for years. I'm not going to meet anyone. I'm going to work on myself. And then a week later, that person came, and I couldn't, deny like the connection. And so I would say, place your intention of whatever you're wanting. I want to work on myself, and I'm open to that. And then begin to do the steps, and then just be open. Like, okay, I'm going to be open. If I meant to meet someone, allow that to come through. And if not, like, then I'm just going to continue to work on myself until I feel safe and good enough to go back out there.
Was there a reason why you gave it a specific time?
Yeah, I think I was just done with how I felt being rejected constantly. I was over it. And yeah, it was like over a decade. And I think I was like 30 already. So I was just like, okay, all my friends are starting to get married, and I'm like, I can't find anyone. Something's wrong with me. It was all, and so there's something needed to change after doing the same thing for 10 years.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I was like, okay, this has to be me. I
Mm,
have to change. It's obviously
mm,
not the other person, because that was what I was trying to change the whole time, and that never worked.
mm.
Yeah.
When it comes to, you had said too, one of the things you said was like, I had to change part of, like you were willing to change for the person you were with. Can you explain what that means? And then I'll tell you what my thought is.
Yes, absolutely. I would compromise myself. So let's say I'm very close to my friends. And so if they would say like, oh, let's go out like this weekend, let's go to the beach, let's drive, go on a drive, whatever that is. Instead of automatically being my full self, which I would have been like, yes, let's go, I can't wait. I would have to be like, oh, wait, let me check with what he's doing first. And then I would be scared to ask
Mm,
him because he would be super emotional. And then I would like not even speak my truth or say anything. And then I would just text my friends, I can't make it. Like, he's not in a good
mm.
mood. I'm going to stay here and be here for him. So I was
Okay.
compromising my joy. And it wasn't sustainable for me to continue to do that. And I
Okay.
wasn't being honest with myself with him.
Yeah. So you made the person your whole world at the
Mm-hmm.
risk of everything else that you wanted to do. That was kind
Absolutely.
of where I was like, oh no, what if that happens? Because I think we all do that. I think because when we're trying to find that validation from someone that we are loved and can be loved, we're willing to risk it all. So how did you start shifting that over from like, oh, I don't want to like upset him, or like, oh, he like, I'm gonna hang out with him. Like, how did you shift that in the relationship you're in now?
Yeah, so when that was with the one who broke up with me, right? Who never told
Mm-hmm.
me he loved me. And so I knew the perspective I was looking out of was the problem, right? It was me, like whatever my limiting beliefs, my conditioning, whatever that
Mm-hmm.
was, needed to change. And I knew, like, I didn't know where to start or how to go about that. And so I ended up finding a life coach who helped open my perspective and expand
Mm-hmm.
the way I thought, so that I would think like differently, more clearly, in my opinion. That
Mm-hmm.
helped me see. And so now, like with this partner, I am very open, and now he's gotten close to my friends. So instead of like, oh, let me go hang out with them, hey, I'm hanging out with some friends. I would actually love for you to join and get to know them and be part of my world. And then
Mm-hmm.
it was like, yes. So now it's the best case scenario because we're all friends and all my friends are his friends. But for some reason
Mm.
in the past, that was not something that I ever even thought could happen or could exist.
Yeah. I think that, but it is, did you ever throw that out in past relationships? Like, hey, I'd love for you to come hang out with my friends. You didn't even feel comfortable
Yeah,
throwing it
yeah,
out
I don't
there.
even think so. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's just, but I think that that's so relatable because it's like, even with friends, I think I've done that where it's just like this friend's over here, that friend's over here, but never intertwined. And it's so fun when we do get our friends together from different areas because then they're like, how come I didn't meet this person before? And you're just like, hey, but I think there's sometimes, for me, I'm going to only speak for myself, is that there's insecurities that they'll all become friends and I'll get left out. And so sometimes that's what has hesitated me in the past to invite everyone into one world. But I love that with my husband, that was something that shifted majorly. Was it wasn't two different worlds. Like, if you're going to be with me, I'm going to be in your world and you're going to be in mine. And that didn't happen before. And I do remember in past relationships asking like, hey, I'd love for you to hang out with my friends. And they're like, no, I won't do that. And that should have been me be like, okay, my thing is, nope, we're gone. Like, I'm not going to drop all my friends just to come hang out with yours. And only like, that's just not, that's again, the non-negotiable is like, I want to bring you into my world, but I also want to be in yours and I don't want to be hidden. And I had been in past relationships where I was hidden, where it's like people didn't even know I existed. And it was like, that's not good. So I love that you're just like, hey, like, I would love to bring you into my world. I would love for you to get to know my friends because I want to do life with you, but I'm not going to not show up for my life. You know, I can't do that. If, someone is struggling with maybe the person they are with has said like, no, I won't get involved in your world. What advice would you have for them?
I would lean into what brings you the most joy. Does hanging out with that person who's saying that, is that where you're finding all your joy, or is it those friends?
Mm,
Because what I'm thinking, my thought process is like, your friends bring you all this joy, and this person who's like shutting that part of you out doesn't love all the parts of you.
mm-hmm,
And so how can you reconcile that, right? So it's either that, help that person, see if that person's open to opening their perspective and seeing what they're doing and how they're blocking a part of you, because your friends, we're relational beings, and friends
mm-hmm,
can really influence and being really big part of your life. And if they aren't, then that maybe is a time to start looking at your non-negotiables,
mm,
and being like, oh no, I really want my partner to be friends with my friends, or at least
mm,
amiable. And so
yeah.
if not, then maybe that person's not for you, unfortunately, which is a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, that is, especially when you're wrapped up emotionally with someone. It is hard to say like, hey, it's time to go. But it always has to come back to that foundation of like, what am I building? And why do I want this person to be invited into it with my what I would desire for this relationship? And I think there's times that we're willing to risk it all and say, I'll just accept what I get. And then we find that those are the relationships that after we've left them, we're like, why did I do that? And it comes down back to what you said is like, that's how I felt about myself. And that's what we have to work through is that inner emotion of like, why am I letting this be a pattern for me? And then when we discover that, it's being truthful to ourselves to say, I'm going to remember that I do deserve to have someone love me unconditionally, not just parts of me, and then say, sorry, you can't show that part of you. I remember like I used to like laugh really loud and I was hanging out with just friends, and they're just like, you need to stop laughing so loud. And I'm like, oh, they're just like, it's just too loud. And I'm like, sorry. And so I started to change how I laughed so it fit them. And then another friend was just like, why do you not laugh like you used to? Like, you kind of hold it back. Like, I can tell you're like holding in your laugh. And I was like, well, and they were just like, stop thinking about that person. And that person ended up like coming and going in my life. And so it was like, man, I wish I didn't like risk my belly laugh for a group of people that ended up not being there long term. I think that it just kind of showed me when someone's like wanting you to change so much of who you are in the worst way, not in for the better, but for the worst. Like, don't do this, don't do that, can't be a loud talker, don't laugh loud, don't sigh like that. Like, that's not someone you want in your corner, because you're just never going to be good enough for that person. And I think it comes back to what you've said, is like, it's a reflection of their insecurity, not yours. Do you have anything else you'd like to add before we end?
I would just say innately, we are all worthy, we are all enough, and we are all worthy of love. And I think if any of this resonates with you, maybe that's like an invitation to find more of that love. And how can you find that, right? And so what I would suggest is finding the things that really bring you joy and light you up. Because when you're in those situations and around those people, you'll want more of that and attract more of that as well.
I love that. I think that's where we need to get back to. Thank you so much for joining, you guys. If you have questions, please put them in the chat and Dani and I will answer them. You guys are welcome to follow her and ask her any questions that you might have. I think one of the hardest part about life is relationships, and navigating those, because we're not really taught how to do an adult relationship. We're just kind of like everyone you're friends with. And then as kids, it's like, cool. And then you grow up and it's like, oh, cool. So if you guys have questions, please put them below and we'll go from there. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.
Bye.